house fell eerily silent while everyone digested what Damon had said.
Whatever the stone is, it can't be worth more than a diamond.
Abigail thought.
Damon, you've made poverty amusing. Well done. I've met a lot of dumb people who pretend to be rich, but I've never met anyone as dumb as you.
His words hurt Damon. Both he and Thomas had expected the arrogant young man to react differently. It seemed like the rich kids of Hillwood weren't as well educated as people thought. In fact, Enzo was plain ignorant. He didn't even know what Californium was.
Damon Hemsworth, get out now. No one wants you here. And Tiffany, what's wrong with you? If you must find someone to pretend to be your boyfriend, at least make him richer than your actual boyfriend.
The guests whispered among themselves. Abigail yanked Tiffany to one side. She had achieved her goal. At that moment, the penny had dropped, and her friend had realized what a loser Damon really was.
I hope now you understand that I didn't lie to you. I saw him stealing with my own eyes.
Then, she turned around and glared at Damon before yelling,
Please leave now. Tiffany trusted you, and this is how you repay her? With some kind of stone?
Damon was humiliated.
How could no one have heard of the world's most expensive element, Californium?
He wondered.
What do these rich kids know?
The party guests recovered from their shock and found their voices.
You've embarrassed all of us men tonight.
You really couldn't find anything better than a stone?
I know this dude. Isn't he that annoying loser from Hillwood University? His girlfriend banned him from making comments in her live broadcast room.
The harshness of the guests made Tiffany feel sorry for Damon. After all, it had been her idea to get him to pretend to be her boyfriend, and she had failed to consider all the potential consequences of her actions. She hadn't realized how painful it must be for a poor person like him to attend a party filled with people from wealthy families. She also hadn't considered that if she gave him the $50,000, he wouldn't know what to do with it. It was all her fault. She wished she hadn't asked him to come in the first place. Seeing that Damon was about to leave, she felt even worse about the whole situation. She knew she needed to apologize to him.
What are you doing?
Abigail shouted as Tiffany tried to break away from her grip. Abigail was outraged. She didn't want her friend to have anything to do with Damon, and desperately wanted her to let him leave already.
Give it a break, Abigail. Sooner or later, Tiffany will understand that I'm the only one for her.
Abigail didn't say a word. She gave him an evil stare and walked toward the backyard. The backyard was the main venue for the dinner that night, and it was full of attractive people who were dressed up to the nines. With Abigail gone, Tiffany quickly took out her phone to text Damon an apology. It was all her fault. She wouldn't ask him for her money back, but she was desperate that he didn't misjudge her. Just as she was about to send Damon a message, the housekeeper came in.
Miss Tiffany, Damon asked me to give this to you.
He said as she handed Tiffany an envelope with Tiffany's credit card in it. Tiffany frowned and felt even more guilty.
Thank goodness for that. At least he has some form of conscience.
The housekeeper looked at the box intently.
Tim, do you know what this is?
What can anyone know about an old bit of rock?
The housekeeper, Tim Potter, shook his head and answered.
I don't know what it is, but this box is exquisite, and it seems to have been carved by hand. Whatever's in it must be extremely valuable. Miss, if you don't want this box, please may I have it?
Tim had been the housekeeper of the Vandergeld family for more than 20 years and had never requested anything from the family until that point.
Oh, come on. The Vandergeld family is hilarious. It's just an old box with a stone in it.
The housekeeper didn't utter a word. He just felt it was a pity to throw something so lovely away. A moment later, a beautiful woman appeared in the doorway, and everyone turned to stare at her. It was Tiffany's sister, Teresa Vandergeld. It had long been whispered that Teresa would come home from abroad in order to attend her little sister's birthday party, but no one really believed it. Teresa and Tiffany were both stunning. Teresa was wearing sunglasses and had her hair in curls. She was dressed in plain, casual clothes, but she looked effortlessly glamorous. She was delighted to see so many people had turned up at the house. She went to hug her beloved sister, whom she hadn't seen for what seemed like ages. Suddenly, Teresa's gaze fell upon the small box in Tiffany's hand. The look in her eyes was even more strange than the housekeeper's had been. Before she could hug her sister, She quickly asked,
Tiffany, where did you get this Californium from?
There was that word again. The room fell silent. At last, someone knew about the stone. Teresa had completed a second degree at university, and she had her own business. She had worked for everything she had, unlike the rich kids at her sister's party.
Teresa, do you know what this is?
Teresa was so fascinated with the Californium that she didn't reply. Eventually, she regained her composure.
This is a big piece of Californium. Tiffany, where did you get it from?
The guests were intrigued, but no one dared to question Teresa's opinion because she was a genius in the business world. Furthermore, she was the pride and glory of the Vandergeld family.
Teresa, don't keep me guessing. What is it?
Tiffany was a little anxious. If the stone was valuable, it was even more important that she defended Damon, especially after the way he had been treated as he was leaving. Teresa seemed to be shaking with excitement.
It's more valuable than anything you can imagine. It's the most expensive element in the world, and it can even help in fighting cancer. 1 gram of this can cost as much as $20 million. I've seen it in a laboratory before, but nothing as big as this.
Teresa held Tiffany's hand.
How did you get such a large piece of Californium, little sis?
The shock in the room was palpable. The very people who had been mocking Damon's gift became silent, all looking at their feet in embarrassment. Could a stone really be worth that much money? Surely no one would be able to buy it. Collectively, the guests realized that they had underestimated Damon. What fools they had been. Tiffany was in a daze. Never mind the apple being good for her health. The Californium was vital for it, especially as the stone he had given her weighed a lot more than a gram. Tiffany guessed the stone to be worth around $30 to $40 million. There was no comparison between that and Enzo's car. Moreover, Damon's gift was more meaningful and significant by far.
Tell me, where the hell did you get this from?
Teresa was so excited. She had to know the origin of the stone.
One of my classmates gave it to me. I had asked him to pretend to be my boyfriend for my birthday, but I hadn't expected him to give me a gift like this.
Teresa almost fainted.
What kind of person is your classmate, if he can give you something like this?
She thought.
Looks like you found Mr. Right.
Teresa was pleased. Any man who could give something like that to her sister must be wealthy. But, more importantly, it meant that he truly cared about her sister's health and didn't pay any attention to what others would think of him. He was the role model for all men. The Californium was a proper gift. All other gifts were mere trifles designed to cheer a person up. Tiffany felt a warmth in her heart. Then came a burst of raucous laughter and cheering from the guests.
I can't believe that some people think a gem like that is worth less than a sports car. More money than sense. These people with luxury cars. Only a simpleton wouldn't know the value of Californium.
Enzo knew that the guests were laughing at him and that all of them had instantly forgiven Damon. He did a quick search on the internet and found that Californium was indeed a priceless gem. Suddenly, he felt as if he had been punched in the stomach repeatedly. His gift really did pale in comparison to what Damon had presented to Tiffany. He wanted a hole to open up in the ground and swallow him. It all seemed so impossible. He was baffled how a poor student could afford such a gift. Enzo didn't utter another word for the entire evening. He looked shattered. He had been beaten by Damon. What was more frustrating was that Damon had even joined up with Teresa to humiliate him. Even if he had enough money, Enzo couldn't buy a gram of such a rare gem as Californium. But a loser like Damon, who Jessica had dumped, could? It was madness. It was at that moment that Enzo swore to himself that he wouldn't tolerate Damon anymore. No way, he thought. After everything that had happened, Tiffany was no longer in the mood for her party. And, as everyone eventually started drifting off, she stared at her phone longingly. In the end, she couldn't stop herself from sending a text to Damon.
Where are you? Can I come and see you? I'm sorry for what happened today. I really want to apologize to you face to face.
Damon was surprised surprised to receive Tiffany's message, but then recalled what Thomas had once told him about what it really took to be upper class. It wasn't just about having lots of money and being generous with it. It also required understanding. Only the ill-educated behaved arrogantly. True breeding required humility. He also knew that Tiffany hadn't meant him any harm. After all, if she had wanted to belittle him, she wouldn't have given him $50,000 to buy her a gift so that he made a good impression at the party.
Is that all there was to it, though?
Damon wondered.
Could she be the one who sent me all those paper stars?
Resolving to find out for sure, he replied to her text.
Okay, I'll wait for you at the university's main entrance.
Tiffany's eyes brightened as she saw the message pop up on her cell, and she quickly typed her reply.
I'll be right there.
She hadn't really expected Damon to be angry with her. Unlike rich boys like Landon and Enzo, he seemed easygoing. She hastily changed into casual clothes and made her way out of the house.
Where are you going?
Teresa called after her sister, throwing her a knowing wink.
Shut up, it's nothing like that.
Tiffany stuck out her tongue.
I'm still hungry, so I'm going out for a snack. That's all.
Not sneaking out on a secret date, then?
No, of course not. Why would you think that?
Fearing that she'd protested just a little too much, Tiffany sprinted out of the door, closing it firmly behind her to avoid any more awkward questions. Waiting by the university's main entrance, Damon watched Tiffany emerge from the taxi and walk toward him. He was struck by the effect of the bright moonlight on her hair, as it was softly blown across her oval face by the breeze.
How can she look that good even in sweats?
He mused.
With her height and figure, she could be a supermodel, and I should know.
The corner of his mouth twitched upward at the memory of her changing into her dress.
Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm still hungry. Take me to dinner?
She batted her eyelashes, confident that he would agree.
Okay, what do you want to eat, then?
I don't mind. Where do you normally go?
Damon was stuck for a response. Up until recently, he couldn't afford to eat out, and he could hardly invite Tiffany to the local supermarket to try free food samples, which is where he would normally have gone. Looking around, he spotted a kebab place next to the university.
What about Ultimate Kebabs?
That sounds great.
From the smile that Tiffany flashed in his direction, Damon could have been mistaken for thinking he'd offered her dinner at the Ritz. Tiffany grimaced as she took a first sip of her beer, regretting having insisted that Damon order for the two of them.
This tastes so bad.
Seeing the look of amusement on his face, she raised her glass to him.
Well, I'd like to propose a toast to thank you for what you did for me today.
With that, she downed the rest of her drink. Damon looked on, wide-eyed.
A girl after my own heart.
He thought.
This is going to be a great night after all.
Half a dozen beers later, Damon and Tiffany returned to campus. Despite the dark, a handful of students were out on the bleachers watching others training. The sight of Damon and Tiffany together caused a number to do a double take.
Isn't that Damon Hemsworth?
What's he doing out with Tiffany? What a simp.
Damon didn't care what they thought about him, and he hadn't gone out of his way to be seen out with Tiffany, but he started to wonder whether she might have done so.
After all, she doesn't live on campus, so why else would she want to come this way?
Once they were out of earshot, he decided it was time to ask the question that had been nagging away at him.
By the way,
he started, unsure how to bring up the subject naturally.
Do you know how to fold paper stars?
He searched her face for signs of recognition, but she simply giggled and touched his forehead.
Paper stars? I think you must have had a bit too much to drink, sweetie.
Damon sobered up in an instant.
Clearly, she knows nothing about it.
He thought.
So, if it wasn't her who sent me the paper stars, who was it? You're right. It must be the drink talking. Don't worry about it. I'd better get you home.
Oh yes, I'd completely lost track of the time.
Having seen Tiffany into a taxi, Damon walked back through the campus. Curious at seeing a light on in one of the teaching buildings, he went to investigate. Approaching what he soon recognized as his usual study room, he heard rustling. Peering in, he saw a girl take a folded star and, in one smooth movement, put it into his book.
Melanie Cullen.
Damon had to stifle a gasp as he recognized the girl.
And it doesn't look like the first time she's done that. She must be the one who's been sending me all the stars.
In his excitement, he knocked over a nearby flower pot but managed to duck below the window just before Melanie turned to see the cause of the noise. Damon spent a restless night.
Melanie Cullen, eh?
He mused. Melanie was certainly beautiful, but she wasn't very popular. Some of the class seemed to actively dislike her, and Damon had no idea why.
Perhaps it's to do with the fact that she doesn't speak.
He thought. Melanie was nonverbal and tended to keep herself to herself. Damon thought it wasn't that the other students didn't like her. They probably just couldn't be bothered to learn sign language in order to understand her. He felt it couldn't be easy for Melanie not being able to speak with anyone, and no one really making an effort to communicate with her.
It's a shame that not everyone sees that.
Damon thought.
They just find it easier not to be friends with her.
He had no idea why she was sending him the stars, but resolved to befriend her at the next opportunity. He wanted her to feel that she had at least one person on her side. It was a restless night for Enzo, too, as he seethed about the events of the party.
How dare Damon make a mockery of me in front of everyone, making my gift look like nothing compared to his.
Back at the Laurier family's mansion, he searched for all the information he could find online about California. Well, he thought, as he skimmed through the search results.
What a coincidence.
He had found out that not only was Californium worth a lot of money, but it was also of particular value in the development of medicines. He remembered that Teresa had been particularly excited about Damon's gift to her sister.
Teresa was the one making all the fuss.
He thought.
The brilliant former medical student and now, surprise CEO of a medical company.
He guessed her company's reputation would skyrocket if she could get her hands on the rare element. It would attract all kinds of interest and, with it, investment.
I should have guessed. She's not usually the type to show any interest in others.
Enzo wondered how Damon had got his hands on such a precious commodity.
Well, you don't play games with me and get away with it.
He thought. He made a vow to himself that he would soon make sure the tables were turned. Teresa may have been full of praise for Damon at the party, but he would ensure that didn't happen again. He shared his dastardly plan with a fierce-looking man who had been waiting for an opportunity to make his move.
Mr. Laurier, count me in, prepared to lose everything. Damon.
Enzo issued his challenge to the room with a sinister laugh.
To see how you get on with the whole Vandergeld family against you.
Damon arrived at the sports ground in high spirits the next day. Although he and Melanie were in some of the same lectures, those were attended by up to 100 students. They didn't share any of the smaller tutorials. Having both signed up for badminton classes, this provided an ideal opportunity to spend time together. He spotted her walking over. As usual, she was on her own, head down, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. Before he could reach her, Damon spotted Alicia coming up close behind Melanie. He watched in horror as she cut in front of her, then stuck out her leg, causing Melanie to trip and fall onto the muddy ground to the cruel amusement of those around her. Alicia's friends laughed and shouted out comments.
Can't talk, can't even walk, talk about useless.
No wonder no one will be friends with you.
Damon cursed and sped over.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
He roared at the group. Reaching Melanie, he bent to offer his hand. Ignoring him, Alicia carried on walking, stamping on Melanie's hand as she passed.
Come back here!
Damon took hold of Alicia's arm to stop her and turned her around to face him.
I saw what you did!